Hi, so welcome to the first session on Pascal programming. Today, what we're going to look at some very simple input and output. We're going to write our first Pascal program, and we're going to just throw output onto the screen. And in another session, in another application, we're going to look at just asking the user for some simple data and throwing that data back out to the screen as well. A lot of new stuff today, but if you look at the video and repeat a couple of times, some of the stuff will start to get familiar. All right, so let's look at the Pascal ID. I'm going to start it. We're going to click on Start and Free Pascal, which comes off screen for me. Sorry about that. File and New. Right. So here we have a blank Pascal page, and our first objective today is to output some data to the screen. All right, so we're going to start typing. You first start off by typing the word program and the name of your program. So I'm just going to give it a name, addresses, and put a semicolon after that. First thing to note is that colors change depending on the syntax, and as we go along we will see what that means. Almost all Pascal statements have a semicolon at the end. Some of them don't, but for the most part this language, like most languages, require you to put a semicolon after almost everything. All right, so the first thing is the program name, and what I want you to get accustomed to is once you start off writing your program, you put a begin and an end full stop right away, because that bit pretty much there, that is your basic Pascal program, a variable name, and then begin and end. Notice the exceptions come up right away. There is no semicolon after the begin, any begin whatsoever, and the final end in your Pascal program has a full stop. All right, that's the only end in the entire program that has a full stop, and if you don't put that in there, the Pascal compiler is going to throw an error and ask you for that end full stop at the end. All right, so this, what you're seeing here, is your basic Pascal program there. Right, so we're gonna start adding. First thing after that, of course, is to save. So you can click on F2 and save, or you can go in File, Save. Eventually you'll get into the habit of file saving, and I'm just gonna put this in as lesson 1 or lesson 01 and click on OK. And as you go along, see, file name comes up there. As you go along, you keep hitting F2. It'll become almost like rote muscle memory after a while. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use a unit or a library called CRT, and this gives you access to a lot of cool commands to manipulate the screen colors and so on and so on, right? So it's just the first thing that you usually put in after your program. There are a couple others, and as you use them, you'll put their names in here and put a semicolon and put a comma between them. But for the most part, especially for ordinary level examinations and so on, you won't be using anything beyond CRT for the most part. All right. Now, within this begin and end, all of your programming up until a certain point will go between this begin and end. This is your main program. Other programming languages call this your main program. In Pascal, this is your main program as well, although there's no way to say, okay, this is my main program. It just understands that the last begin and end in your Pascal script is your main program. All right, and this is where most of your code is going to go in until we start learning functions and procedures and so on later on. Right, so what we're going to do here is we are going to first clear the screen. So to clear the screen, and to clear the screen is to clear the output screen. Before you start throwing stuff on the screen, it may have some text there. You may want to clear it. So you use CLR SCR, which stands for clear screen. And notice again, there's a semicolon here. You cannot, this is one of the only commands we're going to use from, in these earlier sessions that requires this uses CRT at the top. So you need to have that there to use CLR SCR. All right. Now, to output anything onto the screen in Pascal, it's a very simple command. It's write ln. So write and ln. So there are two commands. It's write and then there's write ln. Right ln means right line, which just basically outputs whatever you want to output to the screen and carries the cursor back to the next line. So it's like hitting enter on a typewriter kind of thing, or in Word. That's what right ln does. Right does the same thing. It outputs to the screen, but it doesn't hit enter, quote unquote hit enter. Right. So let's just use right ln for now, and we're going to say we're just going to output someone's address. So let's say that. Now notice that any kind of text information needs to go into or be delineated by these apostrophes. These are actual apostrophes. Some programming languages use quotes like this, but Pascal uses apostrophes. Like PHP and so on, you can use a mixture of both, but in Pascal you must use apostrophes only, right? And then you put whatever you want to output within these parentheses, and that pretty much says that right ln is a procedure, and we'll deal with that in later sessions. And then of course there's a semicolon at the end. Just to remember this sad face, if you don't put semicolons you will have a bad time, right? You can spend, depending on how long your application is, your script is, you can spend quite some time looking for where you may have forgotten that semicolon. So, and that goes for all programming languages that require some kind of terminating character at the end. I can give you horror stories with some of them. All right. So what's happening here is that we're clearing the screen. We're telling Pascal clear the screen, and output this addresses to the screen. And at the end here, we're going to put a little read key. This command called read key. And that pretty much just waits for you to hit any key, press any key to continue kind of thing. Now if we run this, let's save it, F2, save. And now if we run this, let's see what happens. So to run your Pascal script, you go to click on run, and then you click on run. It's going to compile, and there we have it. It ran, and all we did was output addresses to the screen and nothing else. And the cursor is blinking here because it's waiting for me to hit any key. So I'm just going to hit any key. I'm going to hit enter, and it takes me right back. The program has terminated and took me back to the Pascal ID. Pretty straightforward. All right. I noticed a little something there. If you notice, you can go back to the output by going into tools. Hold on, debug output. No, that brings it up into a window. Debug user screen, Alt F5. And if you notice here, so this is the screen, so it's not lost. You can get it back. And you notice there's a kind of light blue and dark blue, so that's not really optimal. Okay, I'm gonna hit escape and come back to here. So what I really want is I want the screen to be like, I don't know, white on blue or white on black, or let's say something funky like green on black. So in order to do that, you use two commands. There's text color, and let's say we want the text color to be green, like matrix, I guess, and the text background to be black, right? And then we're going to clear the screen. So remember to change the color before you clear the screen, right? So what I'm saying here, text color is green and text background is black. Now notice I'm using green and black here and not putting them in quotes. That's because these are constants, and we'll leave that alone for the time being. In a couple other sessions we'll see what those mean. To see if this works without running it, you can simply compile, and compile just basically says, okay, run through my code, see if I have any errors. So what this is saying here, the compile is finished and there are 0 errors. Total error 0, compile time 0.1 second, press the key, compile successful. So I have no errors. So I can actually run this now again and see what happens. So I ran it, and here we see now I have a completely black screen with a green text on it. All right. There is another quick way to do this, which I'm going to start using after this session and in another session, and that is to use a command called text attribute, right? And this has an assignment next to it. So you usually say text attribute, and you use a $, which does not mean money, it means a hexadecimal value, and 02 in this case, which is the background color and the foreground color, which achieves the same thing and then you don't have to type text color and text background and so on. It's a little bit less intuitive. It's less, it isn't self-explanatory, which is bad when it comes to programming. So we're going to take that off for the time being and leave this as it is there. Which reminds me, in Pascal, if you want to leave little comments for yourself or whoever else is reading, you can leave comments in Pascal in two ways. The original, well, three ways actually. The original is to put curly brackets and say, they can write anything in here. This command clears the screen. Alright. That the compiler will completely ignore whatever you put in there. So you can leave yourself little notes, little hints, and so on as you go along. Another version of this is the parentheses star and then star parentheses like this, right? So you can leave little notes in there like that. And if you want to comment out an entire line, you just use the // so this entire line is commented out, right? And it's only after the // so for instance, if I take this out and I just say, let's just say I'm completely muddling my messing up my script, but that's all right. You can put quotes at the end of a line and it just comments out the rest of the line. So set text color to green, which is actually 02, right? And then you can come here and you can say set background color to black, which is actually 00, right? And then here we can take this out completely and we can say clears the screen, requires CRT. Well, actually all of them requires CRT. So you see how neat this looks. So this is new with Free Pascal. This is this / comments, this comments align kind of thing. And that's to keep in the standard of all programming languages. For the most part, all modern programming languages allow you to use this / line commenting now. So it's a good habit to start using this. But for backwards compatibility, Turbo Pascal and earlier versions of Pascal and so on would have used these curly brackets and so, right? So here on in, I'm just going to use / because that's what most people have gotten accustomed to. Alright, so we haven't really done anything. We just output this address. So let me see if we can just tie this first part of this video up very quickly. Right, let's see. This person is John Singh, right? And let's say they are at number 2, number 3 Broadway Lane, and Newtown. There we go, right? And we can skip a line by just putting a simple right ln there and putting a right ln here, and let's just skip a line there as well. Right, so that's just gonna skip a line kind of thing, right? I just saved that, and now let's run it. Alt R, and there we have it. So that outputs John, as supposed to be Singh, anyway, number 3 Broadway Lane, Newtown, and there we have that, right? Notice it skipped the line, so Alt F5 will take you back to that. See, notice it skipped the line here, and it skipped a line here, and it's waiting for me to press any key. Now, if I just I would much rather, excuse the thing, but I would much rather this be white on green. And I guess I have to change this now. Set text color to white, which is actually 15. And this is green, which is actually 02. And let's see how that looks. There we go. Yeah, a little bit clearer there, so let's use that. Also, I mean, you can do that kind of cool stuff here if you're just doing outputs. You may have seen this. um, we can do like a little tab here and put some lines, right? Oh, never do that. Never put two semicolons like that. You'll get in serious trouble. I'm gonna copy this, Control C, and paste this here, and so we get a little funky stuff there. Now notice in Pascal, I should probably point out very early on, in Pascal does not recognize cases, so it's not case sensitive at all. So which is good and bad, because if you notice here I have right ln with a common L and right ln a capital L, right? I have addresses here in common and so on. I could have written CRT here with a capital C and it'll still compile, right? Pascal is case insensitive when it comes to those things. Other programming languages, modern programming languages, are not. So you have to be very careful. If you call this thing CRT common C, that's very different from capital CRT and everything else, right? So get into the habit now of sticking to a case and using it. This is called Pascal case, which is capital at the first, and then all other words and so on are capital. There are other standards that you try to adhere to in other languages, like for instance, this common C, common, the first letter is common, and then like that, you know. So there are other standards as well. You may want to stick with it. Yeah. So just to point that out as well. And here we're going to just do a little write, just to show you what write does. Write, as opposed to write ln, because that's really the objective of this first session, is to kind of look at what write and write ln does. Write is going to, let me just line this up here, press any key to continue, ... and I'm closing this off here, and the command right after is read key, which waits for you to press any key. And if I run this, right, Alt R, Control F9 runs, right? You notice here the cursor now is at, it hasn't gone to the next line, it's right after this ... Right? So we output address John, I still haven't changed this to Sing, number 3 Broadway Lane, Newtown. Press any key to continue. And now I'm just going to press the space bar, and it took me back there, right? SINGH, right? Alright, that's how you spell Sing, right? Yeah. Right. So we just did our first Pascal program, and we just output some data onto the screen. What I'm going to do in the next session is I'm going to ask the user for some information, and output that information onto the screen. We're going to store it into a variable. So the next session is going to be a quick introduction to variables. All right. Hope you had a good one, and I'll see you in the next